Most people will die without ever understanding the game they were forced to play. They'll spend decades chasing fairness, morality, and meaning, never realizing those words were weapons designed to keep them obedient. The world you live in isn't a playground. It's a battlefield disguised as a marketplace. And in this war, the naive are devoured by those who understand one brutal fact. Life is not about justice. It's about power. Every day, you are tested by invisible wars in boardrooms, relationships, and conversations that pretend to be civil. But make no mistake, every human interaction is an exchange of dominance. The question is, are you the hunter or the hunted? Are you strategizing or are you reacting? Most people will never ask themselves these questions because they've been trained, conditioned to think like sheep while wolves write the rules. When Niccolo Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, he wasn't crafting a guide for tyranny. He was exposing reality. He revealed what everyone secretly knows but refuses to admit. Virtue without strategy is weakness. It's not the good who inherit the earth. It's the cunning. It's the ones who understand that morality is a costume worn or discarded depending on the terrain of war. Think of Julius Caesar, betrayed by those he once trusted. His mistake, believing loyalty could exist without power to enforce it. Or Napoleon Bonaparte, who rewrote Europe's map by understanding that perception is reality. Both men saw what few dare to. The masses crave the illusion of virtue, but they obey the scent of strength. Now look at your own life. How many times have you played fair only to be punished for it? How many times have you spoken truth only to be silenced by the comfortable mediocrity of those around you? Every lost promotion, every broken promise, every manipulation you didn't see coming, these were not accidents. They were consequences of misunderstanding the rules beneath the rules. Here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. You're not rewarded for being good, you're rewarded for being effective. And the difference between the two defines your destiny. When I first began studying human nature, not the sanitized, academic version, but the raw mechanics of manipulation, persuasion, and control, I realized something terrifying. The people I admired most were not the ones who followed the rules. They were the ones who used them, bent them, rewrote them. I had spent years losing quietly because I wanted to be liked. Then I learned the first dark truth of life. Likability is leverage until it becomes liability. You may think this sounds ruthless, but let me ask you, how much of your potential has been sacrificed on the altar of being nice? How many times have you diluted your power to make others comfortable? You see, every empire, from Rome to Silicon Valley, was built by those who understood that mercy, timing, and control are tools, not virtues. The uncomfortable truth is that most people are pawns in games they don't even know exist. The job you work, the relationships you maintain, the beliefs you hold, all of them have been engineered by those who profit from your compliance. The moment you start questioning, you become dangerous. And that's exactly where your evolution begins. This video isn't about becoming cruel. It's about becoming conscious. Because once you understand how the game works, you can finally stop being played. The 40 dark truths we'll uncover are not philosophies, they're battle tactics. Each one forged through history's greatest strategists, validated by blood, betrayal, and brilliance. While others search for happiness, you will begin searching for leverage. While they pray for luck, you will design systems of power. And while they die believing life was unfair, you will die knowing you mastered the game. So I'll ask you now with complete honesty. Are you prepared to see the world without illusion? To burn the comforting lies you've been told since childhood and confront reality as it truly is? Because once you see it, you can never unsee it. There was a time when I believed effort guaranteed victory. I believed honesty would be rewarded, loyalty reciprocated, and patience respected. I believed, like most people, that doing things the right way was enough. I was wrong. It began in my mid-20s. I was working under a charismatic CEO, a man everyone admired. He spoke like a philosopher, smiled like a saint, and cut throats like a surgeon. For years, I gave everything to that company. Late nights, weekends, my health. I was convinced he saw my dedication, but when the promotion came, it went to someone else, someone who had spent more time flattering him than producing results. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment, staring at the city lights. I remember the sound of the rain against the window, sharp, rhythmic, almost mocking. I kept replaying the moment he congratulated my colleague, that fake warmth in his voice. I realized something cold and liberating. In the real world, merit doesn't win. Power does. That realization shattered me and freed me. I started studying human nature like a general studies enemy territory. I read The Prince, The Art of War, and Meditations not as books, but as tactical manuals. I stopped asking, why are people unfair? And started asking, what do they gain by appearing fair? That shift from victim to strategist changed everything. A few months later, I watched the same CEO make a critical mistake. He trusted a board member who pretended to be his ally. Within weeks, that board member orchestrated his removal. The man who had once seemed untouchable was exiled from his own empire. Watching it unfold, I felt a strange mixture of pity and clarity. Even the powerful fall when they forget the game never ends. That was my second dark truth. Loyalty is conditional. Power is not. History is littered with similar lessons. Take Julius Caesar. Despite his brilliance, he made the fatal error of trusting Brutus, the man he considered a friend. Et tu, Brute, wasn't just a cry of betrayal. It was a confession of blindness. Caesar believed in loyalty more than leverage, and that belief ended his reign. Or look at Winston Churchill. In the early 1932. His peers mocked him, exiled him politically, and labeled him a warmonger. But Churchill understood timing, the Machiavellian art of patience. When the storm of war finally came, he rose again, vindicated by history. He didn't seek approval, he sought position. He didn't chase love, he built necessity. That's the third dark truth. It's not enough to be right, you must be needed. I learned that lesson the hard way when I decided to rebuild my career. This time strategically. I stopped being available to everyone. I began controlling access, creating scarcity around my time. People who once ignored me suddenly became eager to collaborate. The same ideas that were dismissed before were now brilliant simply because they came from a position of perceived authority. That's when I understood the silent law of influence. People value what they can't easily reach. It's cruel. It's true. And it's the foundation of every power structure from ancient Rome to modern Silicon Valley. The turning point came when I stopped trying to be liked and started becoming valuable. I began to think like a chess player, always 3 moves ahead. Instead of reacting to disrespect, I studied it. Instead of begging for fairness, I created leverage. Instead of seeking sympathy, I built competence so undeniable it forced recognition. That shift was not easy. You lose people when you stop being pliable. You're called arrogant when you stop apologizing for existing. But I'd rather be hated for my clarity than loved for my blindness. So let me ask you directly, how many times have you given loyalty to someone who used it against you? How many times have you handed over your power in the name of being good? And when will you decide that losing your peace is too high a price for approval? The world rewards those who see reality without flinching. And if you can learn to play this game with precision, you won't just survive, you'll dominate. History doesn't repeat itself, it reveals the patterns of power that never die. Every empire, every revolution, every betrayal is a mirror reflecting the same truth. Humans are predictable when driven by ambition, fear, and desire. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago when he wrote The Prince while imprisoned and despised. He wasn't writing for the righteous, he was writing for the aware. Machiavelli saw that morality was a luxury for those who already had power. For everyone else, morality was a leash. He observed how Florence, his beloved city, fell not because of evil men, but because of naive ones. Idealists argued, while pragmatists conquered. The kind-hearted debated ethics while the ruthless took the throne. That's the first historical foundation of the game of life. Those who see reality as it is, not as they wish it to be, shape history. Look at Alexander the Great. At just 20 years old, he inherited a fractured kingdom. Within a decade, he had conquered the known world. But his genius wasn't just military, it was psychological. He understood perception. He cultivated divine mythos around himself, presenting not a man, but a living legend. His army didn't follow orders, they followed destiny. Alexander mastered the Machiavellian principle of appearance over authenticity. Centuries later, Napoleon Bonaparte resurrected the same playbook. He studied history obsessively, Caesar, Hannibal, Charlemagne, and realized that men crave order even more than freedom. He built an empire not by destroying chaos, but by organizing it. When he crowned himself emperor in 1804, he didn't just seize power. He declared that legitimacy is not given, it's taken. And that's the second Machiavellian pillar: power is never granted. It must be seized and justified later. Even Winston Churchill, often romanticized as a symbol of moral leadership, was Machiavellian to the core. He manipulated perception like an artist manipulates light. In 1940, when Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany, he didn't tell his people the comforting truth. He told them the necessary one. I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Brutal, honest, strategic. He turned despair into discipline, fear into fuel. That's the third historical principle. Control the narrative, and you control the will of the people. Now, think about your own life. What narrative do you project, and who's controlling it? Because make no mistake, every social circle, company, and relationship operates under the same Machiavellian structure. Someone is writing the script of power. The only question is whether it's you. When I began applying these principles consciously, the world shifted. People who once dismissed me began seeking my approval. Why? Because I understood the optics of authority. I started speaking less but saying more. I didn't argue, I positioned. I didn't complain, I calculated. That's when I learned the truth every strategist knows. Power flows towards silence and certainty. The philosophers who shaped this mindset, Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, Nietzsche, all warned against one fatal flaw: emotional idealism. Sun Tzu wrote, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." But what if the enemy isn't another person? What if it's your own conditioning, your need to be liked, your craving for fairness, your fear of rejection? That's why Machiavellian philosophy isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's learning to see the battlefield without sentiment, to use morality as a tool, not a trap, to wield empathy strategically, not self-destructively. The weak confuse kindness with goodness. The strong understand that kindness, without control, becomes chaos. So, let me ask you again. Are you brave enough to study power without flinching? Can you observe manipulation without moral panic? Can you learn from conquerors without condemning them? Because understanding these historical frameworks isn't about imitation, it's about adaptation. It's about taking what has worked for centuries and applying it to your personal empire, your career, your relationships, your influence. In the next section, we'll move from history to psychology and break down the first part of the evidence-based strategy that modern power players use to dominate quietly while everyone else fights loudly. Power is not magic, it's math. Influence, leverage, perception. These are measurable forces built through predictable psychological laws. The problem is, most people live reactively, hoping morality or talent will somehow translate into control. But in the game of life, control is currency, and emotion is the tax you pay for not understanding the system. Here's the brutal equation that runs the world. Power equals perception times scarcity times consistency. If one of those factors is missing, your influence collapses. Let's break it down. 1. Perception, the theater of control. The first law of Machiavellian power is that people believe what they feel, not what they see. You can have the truth and still lose the crowd. Why? Because humans are emotional creatures masquerading as rational thinkers. The one who controls perception controls outcomes. Take Napoleon. His soldiers followed him not because of his rank, but because of his myth. Before every battle, he would walk among them, cloak unbuttoned, chest forward, eyes blazing. He knew that presence was propaganda. Even when he was losing, he projected destiny. And men die willingly for destiny. I tested this myself when I entered a high-stakes corporate negotiation years ago. Instead of over-explaining my proposal, I said almost nothing. I used silence like a blade. Every pause built tension. Every word became deliberate. Within 20 minutes, the other party agreed to my terms, not because my logic was superior, but because my presence was. The lesson? People don't follow competence, they follow conviction. 2. Scarcity, the economics of influence. The second law is that abundance kills value. Whether it's your time, your opinions, or your emotions, what's easily available loses weight. This isn't cynicism, it's behavioral science. Studies in social psychology show that perceived scarcity increases desirability across every domain from luxury goods to leadership. Caesar understood this. He rarely addressed the Roman Senate, but when he did, every word echoed through the city. His silence was strategic scarcity, it made his voice sacred. I learned this truth during a period when I was overexposed, always available, always responding, always saying yes. My reputation grew, but my power declined. People respected my effort but ignored my influence. The moment I began saying no, something strange happened. They started listening. Scarcity made me valuable again. The less accessible you are, the more authority you project. So ask yourself, how much of your value is leaking through overexposure? How often do you dilute your impact by explaining too much, posting too often, or being too easy to reach? 3. Consistency, the currency of trust. The third law is consistency, the foundation of psychological power. In a chaotic world, predictability becomes power. Consistency builds emotional safety, and emotional safety breeds loyalty, even in manipulation. Churchill embodied this during Britain's darkest hour. Night after night, bombs fell over London, yet his tone never changed. Calm, unwavering, almost defiant. His consistency became the nation's backbone. He didn't promise safety, he embodied it. That's what leaders do. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It means reliability. It means your presence communicates. No matter the storm, I remain the mountain. When I began applying this triad, perception, scarcity, consistency, my entire reality shifted. I no longer begged for respect. It came automatically. I didn't chase approval. I created gravitational pull. That's when I understood the fourth dark truth. The world is not fair, but it is predictable. Once you learn the pattern, you can play it like a strategist, not a spectator. So here's your challenge. Audit your perception, guard your scarcity, protect your consistency. Stop leaking energy into explanations. Stop offering yourself like a product. Become the enigma, the quiet storm that commands without shouting. Because while others scramble for attention, you will cultivate aura. And in a world of noise, aura is the ultimate amplifier. In the next section, we'll go deeper into the psychological warfare of influence itself. We'll explore how to read motives, anticipate betrayal, and use human nature not as an obstacle, but as your most powerful weapon. By now, you understand that power begins with perception, but that's only the outer layer, the armor. Beneath it lies something far more dangerous, psychological warfare. The ability to read motives, manipulate momentum, and predict betrayal before it strikes. This is where Machiavellian strategy becomes both art and science. In every social ecosystem, your workplace, your relationships, your friendships, people wear masks. And most of them are unaware they're even doing it. But the Machiavellian mind operates differently. It observes, it decodes, it adapts. You stop reacting to words and start studying patterns. The first skill you must master is emotional reconnaissance. That means reading the terrain of emotion before stepping onto it. Just as a general studies the battlefield before war, you must learn to study tone, micro-expressions, and contradictions. Most betrayals are not surprises, they are signaled. People reveal themselves constantly through small deviations, a delayed text, a subtle smirk, a change in breathing. The unaware call it vibe. The strategist calls it intel. I learned this lesson during a business partnership that almost destroyed me. My partner was charming, articulate, and at first seemed loyal. But over time, I noticed subtle tells. He began asking strategic questions about finances he once ignored. He grew quieter in meetings, observing rather than contributing. To everyone else, it looked like focus. To me, it looked like preparation. Within months, he attempted a hostile takeover. That betrayal didn't break me, it refined me. I learned Machiavelli's fifth dark truth. The higher you rise, the more betrayal becomes a management cost. This principle runs through history like a scar. Consider Caesar and Brutus. Yes, but also Napoleon and Talleyrand, Alexander and his generals, even Churchill and his cabinet rivals. Every visionary surrounded himself with vipers. Yet, the difference between those who fell and those who conquered was anticipation. The Machiavellian doesn't trust or distrust, he calculates. Your second weapon is strategic empathy. This sounds contradictory, but it's not. Strategic empathy means using understanding as leverage. Instead of emotionally identifying with someone, you intellectually dissect their desires. You learn what they crave: respect, security, validation, and you position yourself as the gatekeeper to it. Sun Tzu wrote, "To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill." In modern life, that translates to mastering influence without confrontation. When you understand what moves people, you no longer need to overpower them, you guide them. I once worked with a client who constantly resisted my ideas in meetings. Instead of confronting him, I began echoing his language patterns, mirroring his concerns, and slowly framing my ideas as extensions of his own thoughts. Within weeks, he became my biggest supporter, believing every initiative was his idea. That's strategic empathy, transforming resistance into recruitment. The third weapon is controlled unpredictability. Predictability breeds complacency. If your enemies or even your peers can read your next move, they will prepare for it. But a hint of unpredictability keeps them cautious. It creates psychological tension, a quiet fear that you might know something they don't. Alexander used this constantly. His sudden attacks at unexpected hours demoralized opponents before battle even began. In politics, Churchill's unpredictability forced both allies and enemies to second-guess him. He didn't just command authority, he manufactured it through calculated volatility. In my own life, this principle transformed negotiations. When others expected my compliance, I delayed responses. When they anticipated my approval, I questioned the premise. This kept me in control of tempo, and tempo is power. And that brings us to the sixth dark truth. Predictability is weakness disguised as reliability. Now pause for a moment and reflect. Who in your life can predict you completely? Who has learned your emotional patterns when you apologize, when you over-explain, when you fold? And what would happen if, starting tomorrow, you became unreadable? Because here's the paradox. Once you master emotional reconnaissance, strategic empathy, and controlled unpredictability, people will call you mysterious, but what they're really feeling is respect. In a world addicted to oversharing, silence is seductive. In a culture obsessed with transparency, mystery is magnetic. So, while others exhaust themselves proving worth, you will operate with surgical precision, observing, calculating, striking only when necessary. That's not manipulation, that's mastery. Most people will leave this world exactly as they entered it, powerless, obedient, and unaware. They'll spend their lives mistaking busyness for progress, loyalty for leverage, and comfort for peace. They will die without ever having played the game, because they never realized they were in one. But not you. Not anymore. By now, you've seen what most refuse to see, that beneath the illusions of morality, equality, and fairness, the true engine of life runs on power, perception, and precision. That everything you've been taught to call good was designed to make you predictable. The Machiavellian doesn't chase fairness. He uses it. He doesn't seek love. He commands loyalty through necessity. He doesn't hope for opportunity. He manufactures it. And that brings us to the final dark truth, the one that binds all 40 together. Life doesn't reward the good. It rewards the strategic. That single realization separates those who exist from those who dominate. Think of the conquerors who came before you. Caesar crossed the Rubicon not because it was safe, but because retreat was no longer an option. Alexander marched into Persia with an army smaller than his enemies, but larger than his fear. Napoleon crowned himself emperor because he understood that legitimacy doesn't come from permission, it comes from audacity. Churchill faced a collapsing empire and spoke victory into existence through sheer will. They all understood the same law. History bends to those who dare to define it. Now it's your turn. Every principle you've learned, perception, scarcity, consistency, emotional reconnaissance, strategic empathy, controlled unpredictability, control, contrast. Man, they are not philosophies. They are weapons. But a weapon in the hands of a coward is useless. You must become dangerous in the service of discipline. Dangerous not in violence, but in presence. Dangerous in composure. Dangerous in the clarity that cannot be manipulated. So here is your challenge, your initiation into the real game. Step 1. Conduct a power audit. Write down every area of your life where you feel powerless: relationships, career, habits, emotions. Ask yourself, who benefits from my current weakness? Because someone always does. Identify them, name them, then cut off the invisible strings they pull. Step 2. Create strategic boundaries. Stop negotiating your worth. Decide where your energy goes and where it does not. Treat your attention as currency, because it is. Every minute you spend explaining yourself to the unworthy is a withdrawal from your empire's treasury. Step 3. Build a personal code. Machiavelli had the prince. Napoleon had his code. You need one too, a set of written laws that govern your conduct, who you respond to, what battles you fight, how you define victory. This is not morality, it's machinery. Once your code is written, emotion becomes irrelevant. Step 4. Act with ruthless consistency. Power compounds. Influence grows. But only when repetition is sacred. Never betray your system for short-term emotion. The moment you act impulsively, you surrender command. When I began applying this framework fully, my world changed. Opportunities didn't appear. I engineered them. People who once intimidated me began seeking my approval. Even my failures became deliberate lessons, extracted like gold from stone. That's when I realized the 11th, unwritten truth. Control is not about others, it's about you. Because the final war, the only war that truly matters, is not fought in boardrooms, battlefields, or ballots. It's fought inside you, every day, between your lesser self and your greater potential. And the enemy is always whispering the same lie. Wait. Wait until you're ready. Wait until you're certain. Wait until it feels safe. But waiting is how empires die. Waiting is how the mediocre win. So, I'll ask you one last time. Are you ready to stop waiting and start ruling? Are you prepared to accept that power isn't evil, it's neutral, and it's yours to command? Are you willing to build the life that history will remember, even if it means being misunderstood by the weak? Because, as we speak, the clock is ticking. Another year will pass. Another dream will die in someone else's hands. And somewhere, another Machiavellian mind, colder, sharper, more disciplined, is already moving. You can join the game, or you can remain a spectator. But understand this, the world belongs to those who dare to see it as it is. So sharpen your mind, guard your energy, build your empire, and when they ask what happened to the version of you who used to hesitate, you'll smile and answer, "He died when I realized life is not meant to be fair, it's meant to be conquered."